Exodus, return to the promised land. It's lesson 6. So we're going to go back to the scripture we finished with the last time to launch us into where I want to go this time. And it's the third chapter of the book of Exodus, verse 14, is what I want to start with. God replied to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the Israelites. The Lord, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever. This is how I am to be remembered in every generation. Then verse 16 said, go and assemble the elders of Israel and say to them, the Lord, and that's I am, the Tetragrammaton, the God Elohim, which is another word for God, of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to me and said, I have paid close attention to you and to what has been done to you in Egypt. And I have promised you that I will bring you up from the misery of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, the Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites, the land flowing with milk and honey. Okay, I want to start out tonight because we talked about the name and Moses said, who shall I say? If they won't know what the name is, what name shall I tell them? He said, tell them that I am is basically what he said. And so I want to go through that name and the different things that different views so we can get an idea, because the name is important. Not for the reasons you might think, but it's important. So I want to look at Yahweh versus Jehovah, which is correct. We hear both, and so we need to kind of look at both of them and tell which one is correct. In the Hebrew, the name of God is spelled YHVH or YHWH, which is, like I said, it's the Tetragrammaton. Tetra meaning four, but it's four letters. The Tetragrammaton, YHVH, YHWH. Since ancient Hebrew had no written vowels, it is uncertain how the name was pronounced originally. In other words, we don't know how this name was pronounced. Nobody has any idea how it was pronounced, even to this day. So if they tell you they do, they don't. But there are records of the name in Greek, which did have written vowels. These records indicate that in all likelihood the name should be pronounced Yahweh. But is that correct? Shortly before the 1st century A.D., it became common for Jews to avoid saying the divine name at all. They wouldn't say it, and I mentioned this last week. Sometime when you're reading Hebrew versions of the Bible now, or reading something that's written by a rabbi or whatever, and it says God, it'll have a capital G, underscore, and a D. They won't even spell out God because they're afraid of taking the Lord's name in vain. So to keep them from breaking this particular commandment, they just don't say the name. So the name, whatever it was that was told to Moses, hasn't been pronounced since they came up with the 10 Commandments, because they were afraid that they would take the name in vain. What does taking God's name in vain mean? What does vain mean? For no purpose, empty, worthless. In other words, using God's name in such a way that it has so it can mean a lot. When we think of it as using foul words and so on, but that's not really what it means. So down at the bottom it says, they substituted another Hebrew word, Adonai, which means Lord or my Lord, in its place. So they substituted something in, they substituted in Adonai. And here's where it comes in. Eventually Hebrew developed written vowels, which appeared as small marks called vowel points, and were placed above and below the consonants of a word. In the 6th or 7th century, some Jews began to place the vowel points for Adonai over the consonants for Yahweh, to remind the reader of Scripture to say Adonai whenever they read Yahweh. In other words, initially they put these things in there to key the reader in. When you're reading this, you don't say God's name, you say Adonai instead. So that was the reason they did this. The reason they put the vowel pointers for Adonai over or under, depending on what the case may be, under Yahweh or ever the Tetragrammaton, YH, VH, YH, WH, either one, which is right, yes. About the 13th century, the term Jehovah appeared when Christian scholars took the consonants of Yahweh and pronounced it with the vowels of Adonai. Are you confused yet? This resulted in the sound Yahweh, something like that, which was a Latinized spelling of Jehovah. The first recorded use of this spelling was made by a Spanish Dominican monk, Raimundus Martini, in 1270. So, we have YHVH, and I'm going to say YHVH because that's what I like better than YHWH personally. So we're going to use YHVH is what I'll refer to, or the Tetragrammaton, or what that means. So they are here for the first time. They have gotten down to the word, the Latinized spelling of Jehovah. So this is where we get the name Jehovah, why they use the name Jehovah and Jehovah's Witnesses. I can tell you up front before we get any further, that's not correct. Jehovah is not what it was supposed to be, and I'll show you in just a minute why. And is it relevant? No, because we don't know. Use anyone you want to. Now this is David Wilber. I've got a couple of quotes from him because he's smarter than I am when it comes to this. The pronunciation of God's four-letter name, and it has the four-letter name. That's the Tetragrammaton. You'll see there's four, you can tell that I can't reach it from here, and you read from right to left, not left to right. So it looks like a little mark up there at the top, and then the next one, that it looks like a 7 with the little foot down there is a letter, and then the next one is a letter, and then you got this same one again as the ending letter in that. That's the 4 letters. Known as the Tetragrammaton, meaning 4 letters, is a controversial subject in some religious circles. That is because no one knows for sure how to pronounce it. That's no one. I don't care how many PhDs they have after their name. I don't care how smart they think they are. Nobody knows for sure because it hasn't been pronounced in thousands of years. So who would know? What version of the Bible did most of the people in Jesus' day read if they read a Bible? And what did they quote? But if they did quote something, what were they quoting from most of the time? The Septuagint, which was the Greek version because they spoke Greek. Why would they be reading Hebrew if they spoke Greek? Now, many of they went to school and they learned things. They would learn how to speak Hebrew. They learned about the most popular version at that particular time was Septuagint because the Greek influence was so powerful throughout the entire region. So they're reading from the Septuagint. The Septuagint was about 3rd century BC is when it was translated into Greek, first Greek translation of the Bible. It says, that is because no one knows for sure how to pronounce it, and yet there are no shortage of confident assertions. We will focus on why one confidently asserted pronunciation, that is, Jehovah, is incorrect and based on a misunderstanding of a Jewish scribal custom. This is David Wilber. So, and you don't have to go if you have friends that are Jehovah's Witnesses, you don't have to go to them and tell them they got to change all the names on the front of their buildings and all this in their literature. That's not what I'm getting at. You can pronounce any way you want to. You can use whatever name because we don't know. Still with David Wilber here. It's important to understand that Hebrew was originally written without vowels. When biblical Hebrew was a spoken language, there wasn't a need for written vowels since those who spoke the language could easily identify the vowel sounds as they read the Hebrew scriptures. So they didn't need it. They didn't need any vowel markers. All they needed was the consonants. Plus, there was words that we have in English they didn't have in Hebrew, and there's words that they have in Hebrew that we don't have in English, and there's words that they have in Hebrew that you don't have in Greek, and words in Greek you don't have. It goes on and on and on. There's no language in the world, and we get the impression sometimes that this language has the exact same words as this language, except they're pronounced wrong, and this language and so on, but that's not true. Most languages, there will not be a word that's like a particular word that we have in English, for instance. David Wilber again. Jewish scribes known as the Masoretes. Now this was about the 10th century AD. So we're talking about 900 and some years after Jesus' time when this took place. Jewish scribes known as Masoretes developed the Tiberian vocalization. That is a system of diacritical points used to represent vowels that are added to the consonantal text of the Hebrew Scriptures. This vocalization is represented in the Masoretic text. So up until the Masoretic text, there was no Jewish versions of the Scripture that had vowels or vowel markings of any kind, and this was like 900 and some years after Jesus was on the earth when this came about. Where did the Jehovah pronunciation come from? Or what we say instead of Jehovah, most people say Jehovah. It's the way I've always heard it pronounced. So where did it come from? So, David Wilber again. Some have insisted that the Tetragrammaton, which is those letters that you see up there, occurs with the three vowels Shiva, Colon, Gamuts. That these instances give us the actual pronunciation of the Tetragrammaton. Okay, so far you're keeping up. Everybody knows, right? Okay. These are vowel markers that they put there, and some people say those vowel markers were put there so that you could understand how to pronounce the Tetragrammaton, which was the YHVH. That's what people have said. A lot of people for years have said that. Okay, it's not that cut and dry. It is argued that when the Masoretic scribes wrote the Tetragrammaton, they were mistakenly revealing the true pronunciation as Jehovah or Yehovah. So they thought that's what it was doing. So they had stumbled, these Masoretes, in the Masoretic text in 900 and some years, in the 10th century AD, had stumbled across the actual pronunciation of the way that you're supposed to pronounce God's name. And so that's the reason that they came up with these vowel markings. It is incorrect. Those three vowels attached to the Tetragrammaton were not meant, because I'm not good at Hebrew, so the Tetragrammaton is what I'm going to go with for right now. Were not meant to give us the pronunciation of the sacred name, but rather to alert the reader to say Adonai. This is Adonai in the Hebrew. It was to tell them, those markers were put there to tell them when you get to this name, when you see the YHVH in the Hebrew letters, then you don't pronounce them, you say Adonai. That way you won't accidentally stumble into taking God's name in vain. Well, you think what we forget is when God spoke to Moses, between 3,000 and 4,000 years ago? When he spoke to him back then and said, tell him that I am who I am. Tell him that I am sent you. That's the way we would do it. And last week, if you remember, the Hebrew language doesn't have a word for am. So it makes it even more confusing. Okay, we won't get off of that right now. Pardon me? Is that your goal to make it? No, I'm getting to a point, but this confusion hopefully will help a point get clearer when we get to the end of this. Because the last thing we should be arguing about is whether you pronounce it Yahweh or Yehovah or Jehovah or how you, that none of that is important. That's irrelevant. And that's what I'm getting at with all this, because you can see how it got there. And the people are like Jehovah's Witnesses, and I'm not here to pick on them. I'm just saying they put it in their name, and that's the way they say it's supposed to be pronounced. They don't know either. They don't have any idea, just like the rest of us don't. Is it important, is the question. No. Okay. The name Jehovah is actually based on a mistaken reading of the biblical text by medieval Christian scholars who were educated in the Hebrew language but were not aware of certain Jewish scribal customs. Okay, so we're getting deeper in. In short, they did not realize that it was a Jewish tradition to write the vowels for the word Adonai, Lord, with the consonants for the name Yahweh, known as the Tetragrammaton, and they wrongly read this hybrid word as Yehovah or Jehovah in English. So we've got people that goofed up here and people that goofed up here and people that wanted it done like, so isn't that what human beings do? And then here's the bad part. We'll get something that's a minor issue, like you'll see this is in just a minute, a minor issue like whether you pronounce it Jehovah or Yahweh. We get bent out of shape over that and argue over that instead of discussing what's important. And that's the reason I wanted to bring this out. Okay. We'll quote somebody else, Michael Brown. We'll be back to David Wilmer in a minute. That is to say, the name Jehovah or Yehovah did not exist in Israel, despite the popularity of this name in English-speaking Christian circles. That name did not exist among the Hebrews, period. Plus, how if you were a Hebrew and you saw the Hebrew letters where did we get YHVH? Or YHWH, but I prefer YHVH. Where did we get those four letters? Where we got those four letters is it's a transliteration of the Hebrew letters. You notice there's four Hebrew letters, four English letters. Can you read the four Hebrew letters? No. I'll show you. But can you read YHVH? We can read that. So what a transliteration is, you take the letters from this language and you move them over the exact same letters except put the English equivalent over here. And that's done with a lot of different things. So that's what was done in this particular case. That's why we get the YHVH, because I like that better than the YHWH. That's the only reason that we're using YHVH. I like it better. Back to David Wilmer. The three vowels, Shiva, colon, gametes, attached to the Tetragrammaton. You see the four letters that we get the YHVH from, because we don't like YHWH. That we get those from in the Masoretic text are indeed the vowels for Adonai and not the actual vowels for the Tetragrammaton. The scribes intended that the reader is to substitute the word Adonai for, and it gives you Adonai, you read it this way, for YHVH, that we would read this way, which is the Tetragrammaton. So this is actually Adonai. So you see these markers down here, these markers, and you'll see some in just a minute with the Tetragrammaton, if I remember correctly. Those little markers underneath and above are what they have instead of vowels, and that gives you markers to tell you how to pronounce a particular word. Where we have vowels, they don't have vowels, they have these. You heard, you remember the scripture, it says, Jesus said, not one jot or one tittle. Well, he was talking about some of these little marks that he was talking about. In other words, he said, it's not even, I'm not even saying a letter of this. He said, I'm saying there's not even a punctuation mark that is going to pass away out of this. David Wilmer says this, that being said, while there is value in studying this topic, some Jews, Messianics, and Christians become overly obsessed and divisive about it. Why are we Christians determined to find more things to to argue about and be divisive about. Let's take the things that are important, and then we'll, if you want to have discussions about the other, we can. But let's don't get upset. But some Jews, Messianics and Christians, become overly obsessed with and divisive about it. We should care about truth, and we can strongly hold to our views, and clearly we do. But the fact of the matter is that nobody today knows for sure how to pronounce the sacred name. Nobody knows for sure. You all have noticed we use the Holman Christian Standard. We have it in our pews, and that's what you all have. And we're going to be switching over to something, probably the Christian Standard version, because the Holman Christian Standard is out of print. Well, in the Old Testament, in many places, you'll see when it said Lord for the Tetragrammaton, it says Yahweh in the Holman Christian Standard. It doesn't in the Christian Standard. I'll warn you on that up front. That's one of the differences between the two versions, but when you read them side by side, they're very, very close. That's closest I've found. I like the NET as well, New English Translation, but it doesn't track as closely as the Holman Christian Standard. So I am Hava, Yahweh, or Hava. You see these other letters down here. A primitive root supposed to mean properly to breathe, to be, in a sense of existence, be and have. What did God tell Moses? He said to Moses, when Moses said, "Who shall I say sent me? What is your name?" He said, "I am that I am," is what he said. But then he said, "Tell them that I am sent you." So if we were translating it, it doesn't matter what the Tetragrammaton is or how you pronounce it in Hebrew. How is Jesus pronounced in Greek? We'll get it to in just a minute. I'll use that for an example. It's not important that you learn it, but the reason that I'm bringing it up is important. It's important what we're talking about here, because what is the essence of what did God tell Moses? He said, "I am that I am. Tell them that." He didn't say, "Tell them that I am that I am sent you." He said, I am who I am, or I am that I am. Tell them that I am sent you. He told him this, and told him, you tell them this. Okay. And that I am is this word that you're looking at here, which to breathe in a sense of existence. In other words, this is it's an important word. This is the I am that he talked about there, instead of just the simple Tetragrammaton. Everybody want to practice Tetragrammaton to see if you can say it. It's a good one. Exodus 3:15. The Lord, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever. This is how I am to be remembered in every generation. Lord, that you see, I put a star up here beside Lord, and you come down here and you see this, the Tetragrammaton. This is where we get Tetragrammaton, YHVH, self-existence or eternal. What this name means, what YHVH, what this means, when he said, tell him that I am sent you, when he told him the Lord, he said, the Lord, the God, and when he gets to God, he uses the word Elohim. For each one of those, he uses Elohim, which can be a generic for God, like the God Baal or a God whatever, or it can be the supreme God. So Elohim is not as formal, it's not as precise as the Tetragrammaton that he told them about here. Is that important? Was God even giving Moses his proper name? What is God's name? Somebody tell me, what's God's name? Has he told you? How many gods are there? If there was only one Randy in the whole world, when you see me, you got Randy. That's it. There's a whole bunch more than me. There's only one God. Does God need a name if He's the self-existent one? If He's the eternal one? If He's the God above all God, does He need a name? Does He need to be identified as a name? He's told Moses, He said, tell them that I am sent you. Tell them that the self-existent one, He's self-existent within Himself. He's who sent me to you. In Egypt, how many gods did they have? Had a bunch of them. They're all over the place. They had gods for everything. How many? When they finally wind up getting back to the land of Canaan, how many gods were there? They were all over the place. There were people in Canaan that it would have been all right with them to bring Jehovah, this God, what we call Jehovah, or the Tetragrammaton. It would be all right to bring this God because he's probably the God of war, and we have a God of the harvest, and we have a God of the sunshine, and we have a God of the moon. So they don't mind adding another one to it. What was God telling them? What was He telling them to tell His people? Tell them that I am sent you. The self-existent one, the only one. There is none other than this one. There's not other gods. There's just I'm it. I am God. There are no other ones. So when He told them, you tell them that I am sent you, He wasn't trying to give them a proper name or a title. He was trying to explain and describe who He was the best He could. Okay, so I'm going to look at some words here. This is Moshe, which means, I'm showing you the meaning that names have. Drawing out of the water. For instance, rescued. Abraham, father of a multitude. That's what Abraham means. Yitzhak, which is Isaac, means laughter, mockery. Or Isaac, the son of Abraham. Yosef, which is Joseph, let him add, or perhaps simply active particle adding. It's the word adding. The next one is Jesus' name in Greek, Jesus. So we've been saying it wrong for a long time. If we're going to go by the rules they want to go with Jehovah and the Yahweh and all this, then we're going to have to change how we say Jesus. We have to change it in all of our literature. Why do we use Jesus? Because that's the English translation for the name Jesus. And it's also in Spanish, except they don't say it Jesus, but in different languages. But it's Jesus, Hebrew origin, and it means Yehoshua. Who was Yehoshua? Yehoshua is the next one. The name Joshua. So Jesus in the Greek is Joshua in the Hebrew. So if it had been back in the Hebrew name, it would have said his name would have been Joshua. You shall name him Joshua. You shall name him Jesus. That's the Greek name for who Jesus is. But and in the Hebrew, Joshua means Jehovah saved. We're using Jehovah because that's what most people go with. But Jehovah saved is what that means. So now look at some more names. Gene, the name Gene. I don't have all of your names on here, so... Jean is a girl's name of English origin, meaning God is gracious. So God is gracious, okay? Edna, a girl's name of Hebrew origin, meaning rejuvenation, delight. How do you like this one? Sylvia means from the forest or woods, deriving from the Latin word silva. Geneva. They didn't have ginger, so I can't go. Geneva is a girl's name of Germanic origin. It means juniper tree. Jerry can be used for both boys and girls. It has its roots in Old German and Hebrew. For girls, it means spear ruler or Lord is the Lord is exalted? Okay. Okay, so, pardon me? Yeah, she's going to come in with her spear Sunday. Spear ruler. Okay. Diana, heavenly and divine. It's also a Roman goddess, but it's heavenly or divine. Get this one. Kevin, Irish origin, means handsome. So, so that's what your name means. I'm just going by what it says. Tommy is a diminutive form of Thomas, which originates from an Aramaic word meaning twin.
There's another one.
That was my thoughts when I saw that. I said, we got two.
Oh, my word.
If you think any of this is bad, Randy, derived from the Old Norse name, the name Randy can be interpreted to mean advised ruler or powerful advisor. Also, Randy means full of lust and coarse manner. That's why I'm not here on Sunday morning. That's what, when somebody's being randy, they're being vulgar, they're being crude, they're being coarse, so that's when my parents, I don't know what they were thinking about. Hopefully they were thinking about advised ruler or powerful advisor when they go with that. So, what name would you give to God, to the God of the universe? I am? Okay. Anybody else? What name would you give? All these names that we have just looked at, the Hebrew names as well as the English names, have meanings. Okay? So the name we're going to give to God has meaning. What would it mean? How would you define God? So how would you, if you had to describe, if somebody who'd never heard the term God in their life, and you say, I believe in God, they say, who's God? And you say, well, he's the creator of everything. What does he do? He said he created, how did he create everything? What is he like? What color hair does he have? How tall is he? How much does he weigh? What does he wear? I mean, you can come up with all kinds of questions. If you've never heard of God in your life and you had to be pinned down and give a description of God, what would you tell them? What would you say? So, it gets to the important part. Was I am meant to be a proper name? Genesis 3:14. God replied to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the Israelites. The Lord, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever. This is how I am to be remembered in every generation. As what? This is my name forever. This is how I am to be remembered. YHVH, the self-existent one. The self-existent one is the best definition I can come up with for the tetragrammaton, the YHVH, is the self-existent. What did he say? Tell them that I am sent you. That means I've always existed. I always will. There's never any change. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. We can get all these out of the Bible. And so the point that I'm getting at with all this is fun to go through in some respect and confusing in other respects as we look at it. But people sit down and argue for hours and hours on end about how you pronounce God's name when nobody knows. And as far as I'm concerned, God was not giving a name to Moses. He was telling them, if I were to translate it, tell them that the self-existent one is sending you to them to deliver them. I am is sending you the self-existent one. He is to be remembered as the self-existent one. More to remember what than to argue about how to pronounce the name. Name, you don't have to read all that. Self-existent one, I am, YHVH, as the transliteration of the 4 Hebrew letters, Yod, He, Wah, and He. That's as close as a back swamp boy can do with the Hebrew. I'm telling you how you say that. If you heard somebody that spoke Hebrew, they'd say, what is he saying? I didn't have any foggiest idea, but if I didn't tell you all that I didn't know how to, you'd think I knew what I was talking about. But you should have learned better than that by now. But the YHVH, the transliteration of the 4 letters, the 4 Hebrew letters that we have in that name when we see, I've got it on the other page there, the self-existent one. That's what the 4 letters are. We took those 4 letters in Hebrew, we put the 4 equivalent English letters, and that's where we got YHVH. And what do they mean? What does God mean? Who does he say sent to tell him that sent me? Did he say, tell him that Bruce sent me? In that movie, remember? Tell him that Bruce sent me. I tell you what, tell him Jehovah sent me. Tell him that Yahweh sent me. Tell him. He didn't say any of those, did he? He says, tell them that I am sent you.
They qualify that with the God of Abraham, the God of Jacob, and the God of Isaac.
God of Isaac, God of Jacob.
That's who he was talking about.
Right. So you narrow it down. Exodus 3:16, go and assemble the elders. Now, first, before we get past this, has Moses agreed to anything yet? Okay, he hadn't agreed to anything. Go and assemble the elders of Israel and say to them, the Lord, YHVH, that's what Lord, when you see the Lord spelled here, it's the Lord, that is the tetragrammaton, the I am, the self-existent one. Tell the self-existent one, the God Elohim. So the name for God can be a generic name for God, but this particular God of your ancestors. So this, the self-existent one, is the God of your ancestors. The God, Elohim, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to me and said, I have paid close attention to you and to what has been done to you in Egypt. And I have promised you that I will bring you up from the misery of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. Can you imagine Moses standing there? And God's telling him all this. This is what I want to tell you. And Moses is thinking, I hadn't agreed to anything yet. I hadn't said, okay, let's go with this program. That's not what he said. Genesis 50:24, Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, but God will certainly come to your aid and bring you up from this land to the land that I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So this is tradition. Do we know? Had this tradition passed down to the people 400 years later? Don't know, but that's what he told them to tell them anyway. So what God was using, what I was trained is in sales, was there's different kinds of closes. There are different ways you close a sale. And one is the assumptive close. The assumptive close goes something like this. I have a contract here and say, you like this particular thing? Yes. And you're writing, and you like this? Yes. And would you be home on the 14th? Of next month, so we can come by and take a look at what you need? Yes, I'll be home on the 14th. Will you be this? And it's that all you have to do and hand them the pen is sign right there. That's the assumptive. If they haven't said yes to any of this, but you turn it around, you know how many people will sign that? At least 50% of the people will sign that bottom line before you do anything else. Now, I didn't like that method. I didn't teach that method. I taught that method only to teach them the way they shouldn't, because you find out what they want and you make sure you supply what they want. Then you get it. Now, if they're having trouble getting down, like I had one salesman came to me one evening when I was there, and he said, Randy, he said, I'm just having trouble. This couple, I know this is what, but they won't close. They won't write it up. I said, well, let me go talk to them. I walked over. I said, I see you all picked out something you like. He said, yeah. I said, that's what you want. Yeah, that's the right color. Everything about it's just like you want. I said, I tell you what's concerning you. And they said, what's that? I said, you're concerned that if you fill out a contract with us here tonight and you go down the street to another store and find the same item cheaper, you're tied into this, aren't you? And they said, yeah. How did you know? I said, you do it for 40 years, you know some things. I said, but that's what's bothering you. And they said, yes. I said, so let me put it this way. If you give me a deposit tonight and sign this contract, I'll have him to write on this contract. If you find this a better price anywhere else, we'll either match it, do better than that, or we'll tear up this contract and give you your check back. And I'll have him write that on the contract. Would you be happy? They said, yes. So they signed the contract. Did they ever go anywhere else? No. No, they never went anywhere else. And I knew that. At this point, what does it take for two people to form a contract? For both sides to agree. What has Moses agreed to? Nothing. Nothing. Exodus 4:1. We're going to wind down here, hopefully. Moses answered, what if they don't believe me and will not obey me, but say, the Lord did not appear to you? The Lord asked him, what is that in your hand? A staff, he replied. Throw it on the ground, he said. So Moses threw it on the ground. It became a snake, and he ran away from it. I guess he did. If I was holding a stick and I threw it down the ground, it turned into a snake, I'd be gone. Now here's the surprising part is the next verse. The Lord told Moses, Moses came back. I would have been gone. God would have had to chase me down or been yelling to Rick, come back, we're not done yet. The Lord told Moses, stretch out your hand and grab it by the tail. Grab that snake, okay. Grab it by the tail. So he stretched out. And here, Moses is pretty agreeable here. So God is walking him into this contract, if you will. And he's getting him to make a little bit more commitment each time. So he stretched out his hand and he caught it and it became a staff in his hand. This will take place, he continued, so that they will believe that the Lord, the Tetragrammaton, the God Elohim of their ancestors, the God Elohim of Abraham, the God Elohim of Isaac, the God Elohim of Jacob has appeared to you. So each one of these, he used the first one, he says, believe that the Lord, in other words, the personal, the I am, the self-existent one, who is the God of each one of these people, said this. In addition, the Lord said to him, put your hand inside your cloak. So he put his hand inside his cloak, and when he took it out, his hand was diseased, resembling snow. Put your hand back inside your cloak. I would have been a little nervous by now, personally. But Moses was pretty trusting. He said, so he put his hand back inside his cloak, and when he had took it out, it had again become like the rest of his skin. And I'm going to get this part, and then we'll close out for tonight in the 8th verse. And if they will not believe you and will not respond to the evidence of the first sign, they may believe to the... I lied, I'm going to go one more. And if they don't believe even these two signs or listen to what you have to say, or what you say, take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground. The water you take from the Nile will become blood on the ground. What's different with this one and the first two? Evidences and signs. He could see them, he could see the stick turning into a snake and turning back into a stick. He could see his hand. The Nile River was nowhere close to where they were. So he has walked Moses from not believing much of anything all the way from believing he can pick up a stick that became a snake all the way to putting his hand in, and he's telling them, when you get to Egypt, if they won't believe you, you can dip some water out of the Nile. It'll turn into blood. And this is not said here, but it's implied. Moses said, okay. Sounds good to me. Anybody have any questions or comments?